It was meant to be a night of elegance, crystal chandeliers, flowing gowns, tuxedos, and the hum of champagne-fueled conversations. The city's elite had gathered under one grand roof to celebrate success, wealth, and influence. But in a matter of seconds, the soft glamour of the evening shattered like glass. A single sharp sound cut through the music, the unmistakable crack of a hand striking flesh. Every head turned. On the polished stage, a white woman stood with her arms still raised, her face burning with rage. Beside her, a tall black man, known to everyone as the powerful CEO of one of America's fastest-growing companies, stood frozen. And then, the room's shock deepened, because security did not react the way anyone expected. What followed left the crowd unable to breathe. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The night had started out perfectly. The grand ballroom of the Astoria, one of New York's most prestigious hotels, shimmered with gold light. Waiters in crisp white jackets wove between round tables, balancing silver trays heavy with champagne flutes. A string quartet played softly in the corner, while the scent of roasted duck and fresh-baked bread drifted from the kitchen. David Cole stood near the back of the room, scanning the crowd with an easy smile. At 42, he was already a legend in the business world, the youngest CEO to take his tech company, Cole Dynamics, from a basement startup to a Fortune 500 powerhouse. Tonight's gala wasn't just another black tie event. It was a fundraiser for children's cancer research, and Cole Dynamics was the evening's main sponsor. He adjusted his bow tie and took a slow sip of champagne, his eyes catching on a few familiar faces: politicians, actors, hedge fund owners. It was the kind of room where power quietly measured itself in handshakes and glances. Across the room, a tall blonde woman in a silver gown seemed to be watching him. Her eyes didn't shift when their gazes met. She was beautiful in a polished, icy sort of way, but her expression wasn't warm. It was sharp, almost calculating. "Mr. Cole," a deep voice interrupted. David turned to see Marcus, his head of security, standing close. Marcus was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with a no-nonsense way of moving. "Just letting you know the press is outside. They're not coming in, but a couple are trying to get statements from donors leaving early." David nodded. "Thanks. Keep them out of the ballroom. This night's about the cause, not headlines." The evening flowed easily. Speeches were made, checks were pledged, laughter swelled and softened as people mingled. David moved through conversations like a seasoned diplomat, thanking donors, shaking hands, posing for photos. But every so often, his eyes found that woman again, the one in the silver gown. She didn't approach him, but she never seemed far. It was close to 9 p.m. when the host took the microphone to introduce the night's final segment, the auction. The crowd gathered near the stage, champagne glasses clinking, as the first item, a week-long stay at a private Caribbean villa, went up for bidding. David stood near the stage, chatting with a board member, when he felt a tap on his arm. He turned. It was her. Up close, the woman in the silver gown had flawless skin and a diamond necklace that caught the light with every breath she took. Her voice was low, smooth, and yet edged with something unreadable. "David Cole," she said, not asking but stating. "That's me," he replied, polite but cautious. "And you are?" Instead of answering, she leaned closer. "We need to talk. Alone." The noise of the crowd swelled around them. Laughter, applause, the auctioneer's voice, but David felt a sudden drop in tone. Something about the way she said it carried weight. "This isn't really the time or place," he said lightly. "It's exactly the time," she replied, her eyes locking onto his. Before David could respond, the auctioneer announced the next item: dinner with David Cole, personally cooked by a celebrity chef. The room erupted with bids. Cameras flashed. David smiled automatically for the crowd, but he could feel her presence at his side like a storm about to break. Then it happened. Without warning, she stepped in front of him, blocking the view of the stage from half the room. Her hand shot up and came down across his face with a sharp, echoing crack. Gasps rippled instantly. The auctioneer froze mid-sentence. Champagne glasses stopped halfway to lips. Someone near the back dropped a fork that clattered against a plate. David's head had turned slightly with the force of the slap, but now he stood perfectly still. The side of his face burned hot, his eyes fixed on hers, cold, unblinking. And then, the true shock hit the crowd. Security didn't move. Not Marcus, not the 2 other guards stationed at opposite ends of the ballroom. They stood there, eyes on the scene, but no one rushed forward, no one stepped between them. In a place where a spilled drink usually had a waiter darting in within seconds, the silence was unnerving. People began whispering. Some pulled out their phones. The tension was thick enough to taste. The woman's chest rose and fell sharply, but she didn't look away from David. She didn't apologize, didn't explain. She simply stood there, her hand still hanging loosely at her side, like she was waiting for something or daring him to respond. David didn't move either. He could feel the heat of 100 eyes on them, could hear the faint hum of the quartet stopping mid-note. Then Marcus did move, but not toward her. He stepped closer to the stage, turned slightly toward the crowd, and spoke into a small earpiece. Whatever he said, it made the two other guards shift positions, subtly blocking the exits instead of approaching the confrontation. This was not standard, and the crowd knew it. The whispers grew louder. Some guests glanced at each other with wide eyes. Others began recording openly. The slap was shocking enough, but the way security seemed to be, managing the crowd rather than the situation, made the air feel colder. David finally spoke, his voice low enough that only she and Marcus could hear. "What are you doing?" Her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "What I came here for." Before David could press her, a man in a dark suit slipped in from side door. He wasn't part of David's security team, at least not one he recognized. He moved quickly to Marcus, whispered something, then stepped back into the shadows. The crowd was caught between curiosity and unease. No one knew whether to clap, speak, or step away. The gala had become something else entirely. And somewhere, deep in his gut, David knew this was only the beginning. The ballroom felt different now. The soft music was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the clink of a glass somewhere in the back. People shifted in their seats, trying not to look too curious, but unable to take their eyes off the scene in front of them. David Cole was still standing on the edge of the stage, his cheek faintly red from the slap. The woman in the silver gown had not moved an inch. Her eyes stayed locked on him like they were having a conversation no one else could hear. Marcus stepped forward, stopping just to the side of David. "Sir," he said in a tone that carried more meaning than the single word suggested. David didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was processing. Why had she done it? Why was security acting like this was part of some planned event? And who was the man in the dark suit who had whispered to Marcus? The crowd began to murmur louder now, pockets of guests leaning toward each other. "Do something," a voice whispered sharply from one of the front tables. "Why is she still standing there?" another muttered. David finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Marcus, escort her outside." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Sir, it might be better if I said outside," David cut in, not raising his voice but leaving no space for argument. The woman smiled faintly, a gesture that somehow made the air colder. "Oh, you want to hear me out before anyone moves me anywhere?" Before Marcus could react, she reached into the small clutch bag at her side. Several guests gasped, a few actually ducked instinctively. But instead of pulling out a weapon, she produced a folded sheet of paper. The white page seemed almost too bright under the chandelier lights. She held it up for David, but kept her fingers gripping it tightly. "Everything you need to know is in here," she said. "And trust me, once you read it, you'll wish I'd only slapped you." The murmuring swelled again, phones capturing every moment. David's instincts told him not to take the paper, but the woman was watching him with that unblinking stare. Finally, he reached out. She didn't let go until his fingers were firmly on it. He unfolded the paper quickly. His eyes scanned the first few lines, and something in his posture changed. Not dramatically, but enough for anyone watching closely to notice his shoulders stiffen. The crowd had no idea what was on the page, but they could feel the tension building. Marcus leaned closer to David, trying to glimpse the writing. "What is it?" he asked under his breath. David didn't answer. Instead, he folded the paper back up and slid it into his inner jacket pocket. "Take her outside," he said again, this time without looking at Marcus. The woman's smirk faded slightly. "If you're thinking about hiding this, you can't. It's already in motion." "Outside," David repeated, his tone like steel. Marcus gave a small nod, motioning for two guards at the back to approach. They began moving forward, weaving between tables. But before they reached her, the woman stepped backward toward the edge of the stage. Her voice rang out now, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ask him why his company really doubled its profits last year. Ask him about the files on his private server." The room erupted in sharp whispers, gasps, and a few shocked laughs from guests who thought it might be some bizarre publicity stunt. David's jaw clenched. He took a step toward her, but Marcus was already there, one hand lightly but firmly guiding her off the stage. The guards moved in smoothly, not grabbing her, but boxing her in as they walked her toward side door. She didn't resist, but she kept her gaze locked on David the entire way, even as she was let out. The door closed behind them, and the murmur in the room grew louder. People were standing now, leaning toward each other, speculating wildly. The host of the gala, clearly flustered, stepped back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's, continue with the auction, shall we?" His forced smile didn't convince anyone. David stayed on stage for a moment longer, scanning the room. He knew he had to get control of the night before it spiraled further. "Thank you all for your generosity tonight," he said, voice calm but carrying authority. "Let's focus on the cause we're here to support." It sounded right, but the energy in the room was different now. People nodded politely, but their eyes were on him, not with admiration, but with suspicion. David stepped down from the stage and moved quickly toward the side door Marcus had taken her through. Inside the short hallway, the sounds of the gala were muffled. The air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old carpet. Marcus was standing a few feet away, the woman leaning casually against the wall, still in her silver gown. The two guards stood nearby, alert but not touching her. "Sir," Marcus started, "we can have her removed completely." "No," David said quickly. "Give us the room." Marcus hesitated, then motioned for the guards to step out into the main ballroom. He stayed by the door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. David turned to her. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what you've been trying to hide," she said plainly. "And I didn't come here to ruin a party. I came here because you wouldn't answer my calls." David studied her for a moment. "You think humiliating me in front of the city's elite is the way to get my attention? It worked, didn't it?" For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint echo of the auctioneer's voice coming through the walls. Finally, David asked, "What do you want?" Her expression shifted slightly, less aggressive, more calculated. "A meeting. Tomorrow morning. No lawyers, no assistants. Just you and me. If you don't show, this goes public." She nodded toward his jacket pocket where the folded paper sat. David didn't move, but Marcus stepped forward. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning," she replied. "The only one he's going to get." David exhaled slowly. His face was unreadable, but his mind was running at full speed. He had no idea how much she knew or how she had found it. "Marcus," he said without looking away from her, "let her go." Marcus's eyes widened slightly, but he obeyed. She smoothed her gown, gave David one last glance, and walked toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused. "Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. The place is written on the back of that paper." Then she was gone, slipping back into the night like she'd never been there. David stood still for a moment. The muffled sounds of laughter and applause from the ballroom felt distant, disconnected from the world he was suddenly in. Marcus broke the silence. What the hell was that about? David didn't answer. He just reached into his pocket, feeling the folded paper between his fingers. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something he wasn't used to, uncertainty. The rest of the gala passed like a scene David wasn't really in. He stood for photos, shook hands, and accepted congratulations for donations, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Every smile felt hollow. Every clink of a champagne glass reminded him of that sharp crack of her hand across his face. By the time the last guests were leaving, the Astoria's grand ballroom looked almost ghostly. Half-empty glasses sat forgotten on tables, and a thin layer of glitter from women's dresses dotted the floor like fallen stars. The staff moved quietly, stacking chairs and clearing plates. David loosened his bow tie and walked toward the side exit, Marcus close behind. Outside, the city's night air hit him, cool, with the faint smell of rain from earlier. The valet line was crowded, headlights cutting across the hotel's front steps. Marcus stayed close as David's black town car pulled up. They climbed in, the doors shutting with a heavy, muted thud. "Talk to me," Marcus said once they were moving. "What's on that paper?" David didn't answer right away. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded sheet. He opened it slowly, smoothing the creases with deliberate care. It wasn't long, just a few typed sentences at the top, followed by a short list of names, dates, and numbers. But even at a glance, it was enough to make his pulse quicken. Marcus tried to read it over his shoulder. "Those look like transaction codes. Offshore accounts." David folded it back up before Marcus could see more. "It's nothing," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Marcus didn't push, but he kept his eyes on David. "She knew exactly where you'd be tonight, and she got close enough to hit you in front of everyone without us stopping her. That means she planned this, and she wasn't worried about being removed." David stared out the window. The city slid past in streaks of neon and streetlight. "She said there's more," he murmured. "More of what?" David didn't answer. His mind was replaying her words, the confidence in her voice, the precision of her timing. Whoever she wasn't bluffing. The car pulled up to David's penthouse building. He stepped out, nodding to Marcus. "Go home. I'll see you in the morning." "You sure you don't want someone posted outside your place tonight?" Marcus asked. "I'm fine." Inside, the penthouse was dark and quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, glittering like it had secrets of its own. David dropped the paper on the kitchen counter and poured himself a drink. He stood there for a long time, staring at the folded sheet like it might change if he waited long enough. Finally, he picked it up and turned it over. In neat, careful handwriting was an address and a time, 9 a.m. He didn't recognize the address, but something about it, the part of town, the street name, told him this wasn't going to be a casual meeting. David set his glass down and headed to his home office. He powered on his computer, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. A quick search pulled up the location. It was an old, low-rise office building in the industrial district, surrounded by warehouses and repair shops. The kind of place where no one asked questions. He sat back in his chair. The smart move would be to ignore it, have Marcus find her, and shut this down quietly. But the problem was, He wasn't entirely sure he could. If she really had what she claimed, this could spiral out of his control fast. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't bring anyone. David stared at it. No greeting. No signature. Just those 3 words. He typed back, "Who are you?" No reply. Sleep didn't come easily that night. He lay in bed, city lights painting shifting patterns on the ceiling, his mind turning over every possibility. By morning, he'd made his decision. He was going. At 8:45 a.m., David's black sedan pulled into the industrial district. The air here smelled faintly of oil and metal, and the streets were mostly empty. The building was exactly as it looked online. Faded brick, narrow windows, a steel door that had seen better days. He parked across the street, scanning the area. No obvious lookouts. No waiting cars. Just a low hum of machinery from somewhere nearby. At 8:59, he crossed the street and pushed open the door. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of dust. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, the sound of his footsteps echoing off the concrete floor. She was there, standing halfway down the hall, still in the same silver gown from the night before. It was wrinkled now, like she hadn't been home either. "You came," she said simply. David stopped a few feet away. "What is this about?" Instead of answering, she handed him a flash drive. "This is everything. Bank transfers, emails, contracts, all tied to your name." David didn't reach for it. "And if I take this, what do you want in return?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I want you to make something right." "What?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to a battered metal desk against the wall and picked up a file folder. She placed it on the desk and slid it toward him. David opened it. Inside were photos, children, all with hospital bracelets on their wrists. Some smiling weakly, others pale and tired. "These kids," she said quietly, "were supposed to get life-saving treatment last year through a foundation your company donated to. But the money never made it to them." David looked up sharply. "That's not possible." "It's not just possible," she said. "It's documented. And I think you know where the money went instead." David stared at her. "You think I don't think," she cut in. "I know. And so will everyone else if this gets out." The air between them felt heavy. David could hear the faint tick of a clock somewhere in the building. Finally, he stepped forward and took the flash drive. "If what you're saying is true, then you've just handed me the evidence to clear my name. Or prove your guilt," she said. "Depends on what you do next." David slipped the drive into his pocket. "Why bring this to me instead of the press?" "Because I'm giving you one chance," she said. "One chance to fix it before I make it public." Her voice was steady, but there was something in her eyes, not just anger, but urgency. David glanced toward the door. He didn't like being in this place, didn't like being cornered. But now, he wasn't sure if he was the one in control at all. He turned back to her. "You'll hear from me. You have 48 hours, she said. David didn't reply. He walked out into the bright morning, the flash drive feeling heavier than it should in his pocket. The drive back from the industrial district felt longer than it should have. David sat in the back of the sedan, his fingers tapping lightly against his knee. The flash drive was still in his jacket pocket, but it felt like it was burning a hole straight through the fabric. Marcus was behind the wheel. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror. "So, are you going to tell me what happened in there?" David didn't look up. "Not yet. You're acting like whatever's on that drive could blow up your entire life." David finally met his eyes in the mirror. "That's because it might." Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. "You should have let me come in with you. I don't like you walking into situations like that alone." "That's exactly why she said not to bring anyone," David replied. "She wanted control." Marcus muttered something under his breath and kept driving. Back at the office, David headed straight for his private floor. Coal Dynamics headquarters took up 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. His personal office was at the corner, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around 2 sides, giving him a panoramic view of the city. Normally, that view calmed him. Today, it just reminded him how far there was to fall. He locked the door, sat at his desk, and plugged the flash drive into his computer. A folder popped up immediately. Inside were dozens of files, spreadsheets, scanned documents, email chains. His company logo appeared on several headers. As he opened one spreadsheet, his stomach tightened. The numbers were cleanly laid out, donations from his company to the Children's Cancer Foundation, then transfers from that foundation's accounts to a series of offshore banks. The amounts were large, the dates precise, and the destination accounts were connected to shell companies, names he didn't recognize at first, until he noticed one in particular. A subsidiary his company had acquired 2 years ago. He kept clicking, opening email attachments. Some were between people in his finance department, others between outside contractors. One email thread showed an instruction to move funds discreetly and avoid unnecessary disclosures. David leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. He'd signed off on the donation personally. He knew where the money was supposed to go. But he also knew that if even one of these documents made it to the press, the story wouldn't be about missing money. It would be about him. He picked up his phone and called Jennifer Lee, his chief financial officer. She answered on the second ring. "David, you're in early. I need you in my office." Now, 20 minutes later, Jennifer walked in, her expression tight. She was sharp, mid-40s, and known for her ability to spot irregularities in a budget from a mile away. David slid a printed spreadsheet across the desk. Ever seen this before? She glanced at it, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes. Then she sat back down. Where did you get this? Answer the question, David said evenly. Jennifer hesitated. Yes, I've seen parts of this. Not all of it. David leaned forward. Parts of it. She nodded. Last year, I noticed some movement of funds that didn't match the reported allocations. I flagged it internally, but it was handled above my level. Above your level? David repeated, his voice hardening. Who? Jennifer met his gaze. You. The room went still. That's impossible, David said. I'm just telling you what I was told, Jennifer replied. When I pushed for more details, I was told the reallocations were authorized at the top. My signature wasn't on anything. Yours was. David sat back slowly. So someone used my authority to move millions of dollars, and you didn't think to confront me directly? I assumed you knew, she said quietly. David's pulse was starting to pound in his ears. If someone had forged his signature or manipulated the internal approval system, that meant this went deeper than a few rogue employees. Jennifer shifted in her seat. David, if this is coming to light now, you need to act fast. Once the board gets wind, I'll handle the board, he cut in. She studied him for a moment. Who else knows about this? David thought of the woman in the silver gown. Someone who wants it fixed. Fast. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. And if you don't, she goes public. Jennifer exhaled sharply. Then you're already on a clock. By the time she left, David's head was pounding. He stood at the window, looking out over the city, trying to piece it together. Someone inside his company had orchestrated this. Someone who had the access and the nerve to move millions under his name. His phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number as before. You've seen it now. 48 hours. David typed back. I want a name. The reply came within seconds. So do I. It was nearing noon when Marcus stepped into the office without knocking. We've got a problem, he said. David turned. What now? Marcus tossed the tablet onto the desk. On the screen was a news article, not from a major outlet, but from a mid-level business blog known for breaking corporate rumors. The headline hit like a hammer. Unconfirmed reports link Coal Dynamics to missing charity funds. It wasn't the full story, just whispers, speculation, and vague sources close to the matter. But it was enough to light a fuse. They're moving early, Marcus said grimly. David's jaw tightened. Then so do we. He grabbed the flash drive and his jacket. We're going to find out who's behind this before she decides to finish the job. Marcus fell into step beside him. Where are we starting? David didn't hesitate. Finance department. Someone in there signed off on these transfers. And if they thought I wouldn't find out, they were wrong. The finance department of Coal Dynamics sat on the 12th floor, glass walls, clean white desks, and the quiet hum of keyboards. Normally, it was a place of calm precision. Today, David's presence turned it into a pressure cooker. As he and Marcus stepped out of the elevator, conversation stopped. Heads lifted from screens. People exchanged glances like they were trying to figure out who was in trouble. David walked straight to the office of Robert Mason, the head of corporate finance. Mason was in his 50s, tall, with thinning gray hair and a habit of polishing his glasses when he was nervous. David didn't knock. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. We need to talk. Mason stood quickly, surprise flashing across his face. David, this is unexpected. David dropped a printout of one of the spreadsheets onto his desk. Explain this. Mason picked up the paper, scanning it. His eyebrows drew together. These are transfers from the foundation's account. You don't say, David replied, his tone sharp. And every single one was routed through channels that require my authorization code. Mason looked up. Your code. Don't play dumb, David said. Either you moved this money, or you know who did. Mason's throat bobbed. I didn't touch these transfers. And if your code was used without your permission, that means someone inside IT had access to override security. Marcus crossed his arms, stepping closer. Who in IT would have that kind of clearance? Mason thought for a moment. Two people. Kevin Doyle, senior systems admin, and Lydia Harper, who manages internal audits. David's eyes narrowed. Where are they now? Mason glanced at his computer screen. Kevin's here. Lydia. She's been on leave for the last 3 weeks. Marcus gave David a look. That's convenient. David nodded once. Bring Kevin to a conference room. Now. 10 minutes later, Kevin Doyle walked in. Mid-30s, wiry build, glasses, and a nervous energy that made him fidget with the hem of his shirt. He looked from David to Marcus, then to the spreadsheet on the table. Do you know what this is? David asked. Kevin hesitated. Looks like transfer logs. Not just any transfers, Marcus said, leaning forward. These are the ones that diverted millions away from sick kids. And they went through the system using the CEO's clearance. Kevin's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying I did this? David didn't answer directly. I'm saying you're one of two people who could have. Kevin shook his head quickly. No way. I didn't touch these. I mean, yeah, I've seen unusual traffic on the server before, but I thought it was just scheduled maintenance. David's voice hardened. Unusual traffic? Why didn't you report it? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Because it stopped. And honestly, I didn't want to draw attention if it turned out to be nothing. Marcus's tone was cold. It wasn't nothing. Kevin looked between them. If you really want answers, you should be looking at Lydia. She had admin clearance and worked closely with the Foundation's reporting team. She could have pulled your credentials without anyone noticing. David frowned. She's been on leave. Kevin gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, paid leave. Right after the last transfer went through. That's not suspicious at all. Marcus stepped toward the door. Where does she live? Kevin rattled off an address. David stood. Marcus, get the car. We're going. By the time they pulled up to Lydia Harper's apartment building in Brooklyn, the afternoon sun was dipping low, casting long shadows on the street. The building was old brick, the kind with a metal security door and mailboxes lined up in the lobby. Marcus buzzed her apartment. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. David glanced at the row of mailboxes. Lydia's was stuffed full, envelopes, flyers, even a small package crammed inside. She hasn't been home in a while, Marcus said quietly. They stepped outside, scanning the street. A man in a hoodie sat on the stoop across the road, smoking. He watched them openly. Marcus walked over. You know Lydia Harper? The man took a drag, exhaled slowly. Yeah, haven't seen her in 2 weeks, maybe more. She say where she was going? Marcus asked. The man shrugged. Nah, but a couple nights before she disappeared, there was a black SUV parked out front for hours. Windows tinted. Guys inside didn't look like they were here for pizza delivery. David exchanged a glance with Marcus. Back in the car, Marcus said what they were both thinking. If she's tied to those transfers, someone else might have decided she was a liability. David's jaw tightened. And if that's true, they might come for the woman from the gala next. Marcus gave him a sharp look. Then we need to find her. Fast. David pulled out his phone and scrolled to the number that had been texting him. He typed, "Where are you?" The reply came within a minute. Too late to worry about that. You got bigger problems. David typed back, "What do you mean?" This time, the reply took longer. Finally, his phone buzzed. Check the news. Marcus grabbed his tablet and pulled up the latest headlines. The blood drained from his face as he handed it to David. The top story wasn't from a small blog this time. It was from one of the biggest national networks. Breaking, allegations surface against Coal Dynamics in charity fund scandal. Below it, a blurry still image. David on stage at the gala, seconds after the slap. Marcus muttered, "They're framing this so the slap looks like it was about the scandal." David's mind was already moving. The clock was ticking faster now. Whoever was behind this wasn't waiting for the 48 hours to run out. He leaned forward in his seat. Marcus, we're not just finding her. We're finding Lydia, the SUV, and whoever's pulling these strings. And we're doing it before the board calls me in. Marcus nodded. Then we better move now. Marcus drove, fast but steady, weaving through late afternoon traffic as the city buzzed outside. The headlines were spreading like wildfire. David could almost feel the weight of every tweet, every news alert stacking against him. David sat in the back seat, phone in hand, scrolling through the latest coverage. The slap from the gala was now being played on repeat across multiple news outlets, paired with speculation about hidden tensions and financial misconduct. Some commentators were already speaking about it, as if it were proven fact. Marcus glanced at him in the rearview mirror. We're losing the public before we've even had a chance to speak. David didn't look up, which is why we have to get ahead of this. If we can find Lydia, we might find who's really behind it. Marcus nodded, but kept his eyes on the road. I've got a contact in NYPD who owes me a favor. We'll start there. They pulled into a narrow side street near the 9th Precinct. Marcus parked in a spot that probably wasn't legal and led David through a side entrance. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the faint smell of old coffee lingered. Detective Maria Ortega was waiting in a small interview room. She was sharp-eyed, mid-30s, and wore her badge clipped to her belt. "Marcus," she said, shaking his hand. "This must be David Cole." David returned the handshake. "Detective, thank you for meeting with us." "Marcus says you're looking for someone who might be in trouble," Ortega said, motioning for them to sit. "Name?" "Lydia Harper," Marcus said, "former internal audit manager at Coal Dynamics. She's been missing for at least 2 weeks." Ortega opened a notebook. "Missing persons report?" "Not filed," David admitted. "We only realized she was gone today." Ortega gave a small, unimpressed nod. "All right, give me a minute." She left the room. David leaned toward Marcus. "If she finds out Lydia is connected to the missing money, she'll want to ask a lot more questions." Marcus shrugged. "Better she's asking us than a reporter." Ortega came back 10 minutes later with a thin file. She dropped it on the table. "Your Lydia Harper was last seen leaving her building on the evening of the 4th Street. Cam shows her getting into a black SUV. No plates visible. She hasn't been seen since." David frowned. "Who owns the SUV?" "Working on it," Ortega said. "But here's the thing. 2 days later, a Jane Doe matching her description was checked into a private clinic in Jersey. She left before police could make contact." David straightened. She's alive. Ortega nodded. At least she was a week ago. But someone's making sure she stays hard to find. David's phone buzzed. A new text from the unknown number. Stop chasing ghosts. Focus on the ones still standing. He showed it to Marcus. Marcus muttered, she's watching us. Ortega raised an eyebrow. She? David kept his tone even. Hey, whistleblower. Someone who confronted me at the gala. Ortega gave him a long look, but didn't push. If this woman's tied to the missing money, you've got more enemies than you realize. I'll keep digging on Lydia, but don't expect her to just show up. They left the precinct and climbed back into the car. Marcus pulled into traffic. So, what's the next move? David rubbed his temple. The SUV. We track it. We track whoever's pulling Lydia's strings. Marcus's phone rang. He put on speaker. Yeah. A deep voice came through. That SUV you asked me to look into? It's a rental. Paid for in cash at a place in Long Island City. No name on the paperwork, just a burner number. But here's the thing. It's been seen twice this week parked outside your company headquarters. David felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. They're watching me. Marcus's voice was grim. Or waiting for you. They drove straight to the rental location. It was a rundown lot surrounded by chain-link fencing, a small office trailer at the back. A skinny man with a beard and a baseball cap sat behind the counter, flipping through a tabloid magazine. Marcus leaned on the counter. We're looking for a black SUV. Rented in cash. The man barely looked up. Lots of people rent SUVs. Marcus pulled out a $100 bill and slid it across the counter. This one was rented on the 3rd. The man's eyes flicked to the bill, then to Marcus. Slowly, he got up and went to a filing cabinet. He pulled a folder and flipped through it. Yeah. Here we go. Black Escalade. Rented for a week. Returned early yesterday. David asked who brought it back. The man shrugged. Guy in a baseball cap. Tall, broad shoulders. Didn't talk much. Smelled like cigarettes. Marcus pressed. Any idea where he went after? The man smirked. Buddy, I'm not a GPS. But he left in a gray sedan that was waiting across the street. They stepped outside. David scanned the street. This is a dead end unless we can trace that sedan. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and swore under his breath. The woman from the gala just sent me a message. David's head snapped around. She has your number? Marcus handed him the phone. The text was short. Meet me tonight. Pier 19. Alone. David exhaled slowly. She's changing the plan. Marcus shook his head. Or she knows we're close to something. David looked out over the skyline in the distance. The sun was dipping low again, shadows stretching long. This wasn't just about the missing money anymore. Someone was controlling the board, moving pieces faster than they could keep up. Pier 19 was on the edge of the Hudson, a place where the sound of the water could drown out conversation, and the wind carried the smell of salt and diesel fuel. Meeting her there meant fewer eyes, fewer ears, and more risk. David said quietly, we go. But this time, we're ready for whatever she's walking us into. The city looked different at night, not just darker, but sharper, like every shadow was hiding something. Marcus kept the car rolling slow along the West Side Highway as they approached Pier 19. The pier was mostly abandoned at this hour, save for a few rusting fishing boats tied to the docks. A faint hum from a generator echoed somewhere nearby, mixing with the distant slap of waves against the wooden pilings. Marcus parked 2 blocks away. If she wanted you alone, I'm guessing she won't be thrilled to see me. David adjusted his coat. You'll be close. If things go bad, I need you to step in. Marcus gave a single nod and popped the trunk. Inside, a small duffel bag held a compact flashlight, a camera, and a pair of thin gloves. He handed David the flashlight. Better than walking blind. David took it and stepped out, the cool night air hitting his face. He walked the last stretch alone, the crunch of gravel under his shoes louder than he liked. Near the end of the pier, a tall figure stood silhouetted against the water. She didn't turn at first. The wind lifted strands of her blonde hair, and the faint glow from the streetlights caught on her profile. You came, she said, voice low. David stopped a few feet away. You want to talk? I'm here. She finally faced him, the same white woman from the gala. Tonight she wore a dark jacket over simple jeans, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked less like a socialite and more like someone ready to run. Do you know why I slapped you? She asked. David kept his voice calm. Public humiliation. Distraction. Take your pick. Her jaw tightened. You had money moving through your company, money that didn't belong there. Lydia found it. She told me. David's pulse quickened. Lydia's missing. I know, she said. And if you keep digging, you'll be next. He took a step closer. Then help me. Tell me who's pulling the strings. She looked past him, scanning the dark. You think I can? I'm already too deep. Something in her tone wasn't arrogance. It was fear. David pressed. The SUV. The rental in Long Island City. That's tied to whoever took Lydia, isn't it? She hesitated, then nodded once. But it's bigger than that. The man driving it, he's not just muscle. He's a cleaner. If Lydia talked, she's already, her words cut off. David noticed her eyes shift slightly over his shoulder. He turned. A figure was walking down the pier toward them. The man was tall, shoulders broad under a gray coat. His steps were slow, deliberate. The dull metal glint near his side told David enough. The man had a weapon. The woman's voice dropped to a whisper. You should leave. Now. David didn't move. Who is he? Someone who doesn't miss, she said. The man in the coat stopped 10 feet away. His face was calm, expressionless. We need to go, he said to the woman. She shook her head. I'm not going anywhere. His gaze shifted to David. Then he does. David's grip on the flashlight tightened. He kept his voice steady. If you want me gone, you'll have to make it happen. The man smiled faintly, not with humor, but with certainty. Not a problem. Before David could react, Marcus's voice came from the shadows. Step back. The man in the coat turned just as Marcus emerged from behind a stack of crates, holding the compact camera in one hand. Smile, Marcus said, snapping a flash photo that briefly lit the pier. The man's reaction was small but telling, a twitch in the jaw, a shift in stance. Your face is now in my files, Marcus said. Walk away, or the next stop is every news outlet in the city. For a moment, the wind was the only sound. Then the man stepped back, eyes locked on Marcus. This isn't over. He turned and walked down the pier, disappearing into the dark. The woman exhaled shakily. You just painted a target on both of you. David looked at her. Then give us something worth the risk. She reached in her jacket and pulled out a small, battered USB drive. Everything Lydia found is on here. But it's encrypted. Without the passcode, it's just noise. David took it. Who has the passcode? Her voice was almost a whisper. Lydia, or whoever took her. She glanced toward the street. I can't be seen with you. But if you want the truth, start looking at your own boardroom. Not everyone in that building is who you think they are. She stepped back, eyes flicking to the shadows again. Go, before he comes back with more than a warning. David and Marcus didn't argue. They moved fast back toward the car. Once inside, Marcus locked the doors and pulled away. You trust her? David stared at the USB in his hand. I don't trust anyone right now. Marcus's knuckles were tight on the wheel. She's right about one thing. If someone inside your own company is helping them, we can't just barge in. We'll have to get creative. David nodded slowly. Then we start by finding Lydia. If she's alive, she's the only one who can blow this wide open. Marcus gave a humorless laugh. And if she's not? David's eyes stayed on the USB. Then we find whoever made sure of it. The city lights blurred past as they drove, but in David's mind, every detail from the pier stayed sharp. The woman's warning, the man's calm threat, the USB in his palm like a ticking clock. Whatever game was being played, the next move was his. Back at Marcus's apartment, the night air still clung to them. David set the USB drive on the small kitchen table like it was something alive. Marcus tossed his jacket onto the couch and poured 2 glasses of water. No coffee, David asked, eyeing the cup. Not if you want steady hands, Marcus said. You've got that look like you're ready to tear this thing apart with your teeth. David leaned forward. If what she said is true, this isn't just about stolen money. Somebody inside my company is helping them. That means every phone call, every meeting could be a setup. Marcus sat and opened his laptop. Let's see if we can get past the lock on this thing without blowing it up. David slid the USB across the table. She said it's encrypted, strong enough that without the passcode, it's useless. Yeah, well, Marcus muttered, sometimes useless still leaks. He plugged it in. The screen flashed a black window with a simple white prompt. Enter passcode. No hints, no recovery options. Marcus frowned. This isn't your basic password. This is custom. Someone wanted this locked tighter than a senator's tax returns. David's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. David Cole. The voice was male, low, steady. Yes, you're making a mistake. That drive isn't yours to have. Bring it to the corner of 8th and within 30 minutes, and maybe you keep breathing. The line went dead. David set the phone down slowly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing that wasn't customer service. They want the drive. They know I have it. Marcus typed a few more commands, eyes narrowing. Then we're on a clock, and I'm not walking into a drop with something I haven't copied. David's eyes flicked to the screen. You can copy it. Not all of it, Marcus said, but maybe enough. The laptop's fan whirred as lines of code scrolled. Outside, a horn blared, followed by the distant thump of bass from a passing car. David's mind wasn't on the city sounds, it was on the voice from the call, on the calm certainty in those few words. 5 minutes later, Marcus cursed under his breath. I got a partial. Half the files are locked, half aren't, and the half I can see. He spun the screen toward David. It was a list of transaction IDs, dates, and routing numbers, millions of dollars moving in and out of accounts overseas. But instead of names, each entry had a single letter. CJRK, code names, David said. Or initials, Marcus replied. David scanned the list again, his pulse quickening. See, could be Carter, one of my board members. He's been pushing for overseas expansion. Slow down, Marcus said. Could be coincidence. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. Every name that popped into David's head came with a face from a boardroom or a gala, people he'd shaken hands with, trusted, maybe even defended. Marcus unplugged the drive. We've got enough to start making calls. But we can't let them know we're looking. David stood. I'm not calling anyone. Not yet. I want to see Carter's office. Tonight. Marcus gave him a look. You're talking about breaking into your own company's building at midnight? Not breaking in, David said. Just using my access. Uh-huh. Marcus muttered, grabbing his jacket. Let's hope your key card still works. The streets were nearly empty as they drove to the glass-fronted headquarters of Cole Systems. The building loomed over the block, its logo glowing faintly in white against the black sky. David swiped his card at the side entrance. The light flashed green, and the lock clicked open. Inside, the lobby was silent except for the faint hum of the vending machines. They took the elevator to the 21st floor executive offices. The carpet muffled their steps as they moved toward Carter's door. David pulled a small ring of keys from his coat and found the one for the office. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cologne and old coffee. Marcus closed the blinds while David went straight to the desk. A sleek black laptop sat in the center, its lid closed. David opened it. Password prompt. Marcus was already pulling a small device from his bag. Give me 60 seconds. The device plugged into the side, screen flickering briefly before the login window disappeared. The desktop loaded, neat, empty except for a single folder named Travel. David opened it. Inside were scanned boarding passes, hotel receipts, and one strange document labeled Bahrain Notes. He clicked. A list of names and meeting locations filled the screen, half of them overseas, the other half in New York. One name stood out, Lydia James. David's throat tightened. She was here. A month ago. Marcus took a photo of the screen with his phone. We need to move. If there's a tracker on this laptop, we're already burning time. They shut everything down and slipped out the way they came. Back in the car, David stared out at the quiet streets. If Carter's involved, he's not working alone. Someone signed off on those transfers. Someone with more reach. Marcus pulled into the shadows of Side Street. In your thinking boardroom, David nodded slowly. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an unscheduled meeting. No warning. If they're hiding something, I'll see it in their faces. Marcus looked at him. And if they already know you're onto them? David's voice was low but firm. Then the next move isn't in the boardroom. It's in the streets. Outside, the first thin line of dawn was cutting into the dark. But the night's weight hadn't lifted. If anything, it was pressing harder. David knew one thing for certain. The gala slap had been nothing compared to the blow that was coming. The morning sun hit the glass walls of Cole Systems headquarters, casting sharp lines across the marble lobby. David walked in wearing a dark suit, his expression unreadable. His footsteps echoed as he approached the elevator. Marcus was already upstairs, seated in the back corner of the boardroom with a laptop open, pretending to be reviewing quarterly figures. He gave David a subtle nod when he walked in. The board members were gathered around the long, polished table, Carter leaning back with his usual smug confidence, Meredith from legal, flipping through papers, and a few others whose faces barely shifted when David announced, "This is an unscheduled meeting." Lydia James wasn't at the table. David placed a slim folder on the table and looked at each person in turn. Last night, I discovered something. Money leaving our accounts. Large amounts. Moving through shell companies to accounts overseas. This isn't speculation. I have the transaction IDs. Meredith frowned. David, if this is about the acquisition, it's not, he cut in. It's about betrayal. Someone in this room has been selling us out. The air thickened. Carter leaned forward, a smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. That's a heavy accusation. David opened the folder, revealing printed copies of the files from Carter's laptop. These came from your office, Carter. Your laptop. The meetings with Lydia James. The transfers. Carter's smirk didn't fade. That's interesting, because I was told you've been digging into company systems without board approval. That's a bigger problem than whatever wild story you're spinning. Marcus tapped his laptop, and the screen on the wall came to life, displaying a split screen. On the left, the Bahrain Notes document with Carter's meetings. On the right, a video clip, grainy but clear enough. It showed Carter at a private dinner with Lydia James, handing her a black envelope. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the projector. Meredith's voice was careful. David, this is still circumstantial. It doesn't prove intent. Before David could answer, the boardroom doors opened. Two security guards stepped in, both wearing the company's dark blue uniforms, earpieces in. Carter smiled now, openly. Glad you could join us. I believe Mr. Cole is trespassing in his own office. Please escort him out. The guards walked toward David. Marcus tensed, his hand under the table. But then, halfway to David, the lead guard stopped. He turned to Carter. Sir, we've been instructed to detain you. The smirk drained from Carter's face. What? The second guard moved behind him, pulling a pair of flex cuffs from his belt. We have footage from last night, Carter. You were in the building after hours without clearance. The CEO's clearance covers him. Yours doesn't. Carter jerked to his feet. This is a setup. David stayed seated, his eyes locked on him. No, Carter. This is your work catching up with you. The guards moved quickly. Carter tried to step away, but the second guard caught his wrist and snapped the cuffs on. Meredith looked from David to the guards, confusion and shock on her face. Who authorized this? The lead guard's voice was calm. Corporate security answers directly to the CEO. Always has. We just don't get called for board members very often. The murmurs around the table grew louder. Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold like a chess game he'd already won. Carter twisted in the guard's grip, glaring at David. You think this ends with me? You have no idea how deep this goes. David stood slowly. Then you'd better start talking. The guard began leading Carter toward the door. He stopped in the doorway, turning back just enough for his voice to carry. You won't be safe, Cole. None of you will. Then he was gone, the sound of their footsteps fading down the hall. The boardroom sat in stunned silence. Meredith finally spoke. If he's telling the truth about others being involved, David cut in, his voice firm. Then we'll find them. But today, this company belongs to people who work for it, not against it. Marcus closed his laptop and stood. I'll get the files to federal investigators. You'll have a case that sticks. David gave him a small nod. The knot in his chest loosened, but only slightly. The slap at the gala had seemed random, personal. Now he saw it for what it was, the first crack in a wall hiding something much larger. As the board members filed out, a few stopped to shake his hand, their faces a mix of relief and caution. When the last one was gone, Marcus stepped beside him. You know this isn't over. David looked out at the skyline beyond the glass. I'm counting on it. Far below, the city moved on, cars in the streets, people heading to work, unaware that, in one high-rise boardroom, the balance of power had shifted in a single morning. And though the noise of the city carried on, David knew the silence in the room was louder. Because silence meant everyone was thinking the same thing. If Carter was bold enough to make his move in the open, whoever came next would be worse. The fight had just begun. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, in order to strengthen our community, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.